May peace and blessings be upon you and welcome. You're watching the My Voice show on EOS with your host, Aisha Heather. You may have heard of us from our magazine, the My Voice magazine. We're the voice of Muslim youth. We come together to discuss the topics that matter to youth. So we've brought the show for you, and today's theme is one that hits home. It's mental health. These days, many are facing a great struggle, one of the mind. And there are so many statistics surrounding mental health. In any given year, 1 in 5 Canadians experiences a mental illness or an addiction problem. And with these huge numbers, we're caught wondering, what's going on? Today, to answer our questions, we have Brother Muhammad Sheikh, who calls himself the Mind Mechanic, and he is the owner of the platform Coach the Mind. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Muhammad.
Wa alaikum salam. How are you? Thank you for having me.
I'm good, alhamdulillah.
Good, alhamdulillah.
And thank you so much for joining us. I've heard that you don't like the term mental health. Why?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say it's not that I don't like the term mental health.
Okay.
I just think it would be perhaps more empowering to individuals if we were to talk more about mental wellness, right? Because with mental health, if you were to Google that and even click on images, you get a lot more sometimes the story of what's necessarily wrong as opposed to what's necessarily right. So, I mean, I'm a big believer. I know you know about all of the organizations that I work with. I just finished a course called Mental Health First Aid, right? So it's a very important, very close to my heart as well, this work, right? But I just think from a branding perspective, right, perhaps mental wellness would be more empowering to individuals.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I mentioned statistics earlier. You know, in any given year, 1 in 5 Canadians experiences a mental illness or an addiction problem. That means if I'm in a group of 5, it might be my friends or my family, it's likely that one of them, is experiencing a mental illness or an addiction problem. So what's going on?
What's going on? That's definitely a question that we can spend all day talking about, but here's actually something interesting. That statistic, in my point of view, it's actually low, right? I think that statistic is actually much, much higher, and that has to do a lot with the fact that, first of all, when we struggle, we don't always go out and seek professional help. And when we do, we don't always go to a doctor, for example, right? And it is a doctor that actually reports these statistics to Health Canada. So those are the ones where they're pulling these statistics from, and a lot of it doesn't go reported. I personally think that we all go through challenges in life, that we're all going to have mental health problems in our life, and I actually say that we all, given what's going on in all of our lives, it's absolutely normal, actually, for all of us, every single one, to have at least one sort of mental health problem, which is different than a mental health disorder or an addiction, but just to have these mental health problems at least once a year. I think everyone, the statistics are 100%.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I think we're just going to get into some definitions now, because sometimes it can be unclear. You know?
Yes.
What is depression and what is anxiety? So can you answer to that?
Yeah, sure. So again, even depression, right, the way we use the words, I mean, there's a very big difference in terms of saying I'm feeling depressed or I'm having depressive states. It could just be a feeling of feeling down, right? And then there's clinical depression, right? And in order for you to fit that criteria, it is not that something happened, you know, in your life. So for example, you lose someone close to you, right? Grief is normal, right? And it takes time. But when you have these sort of depressive states where you're feeling down all the time for a lengthy period of time, and everyone should talk to a medical professional, right, which I'm not, to determine what that length of time is before they get diagnosed as clinical depression. But just to use the word loosely, right, it's something absolutely we all go through, and it's feelings of feeling down. There's also that aspect of we no longer seem to have hope. It's as if everything is closing down. We don't see that light at the end of the tunnel. So when these sort of feelings, which are normal, but when they go for a prolonged period of time, you know, without any sort of, you know, up, right, or any highs, then yeah, I mean, we normally would call that depression, right? But last thing I want anyone to do is to take a label and self-diagnose, because
Yeah.
that's not helpful.
And we can do that.
And we can do that, yeah, and a lot of people do, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, that's why you should always, I can't stress that enough, seek out actual professional help, right? And I'm sure we'll get a little bit more into
Yeah.
that. Anxiety?
Anxiety, yeah.
Okay.
What is anxiety?
So anxiety is, so anxiety, again, it's something absolutely normal, right? Anxiety is a sense of fear, a sense of not knowing what's going to end up happening, right? And it's absolutely normal. We all experience anxiety, right? So for example, if someone was to tell me, I need to go, I don't know, speak in front of 10,000 people, right? When I get that news, there's going to be, my body is going to react like, oh my God, am I ready for this, right? So that's normal. When that no longer, maybe I'm done the speech, all right? So that thing that was causing me the anxiety has now gone away. What's normal now is for the anxiety to also go away.
Okay.
Right? An anxiety problem or an anxiety disorder, we start getting into these sort of cases where there's actually nothing there, perhaps, or perhaps what is there, you know, is disproportionate, or they're just feeling that state of fear, that state of not knowing what's going to end up happening, you know, that alertness, like, you know, always looking around as if waiting for something to happen all the time. For a period of time, a lengthy period of time. So that's when, you know, from the more clinical sense, right? But again, you should always talk to a professional about that.
Okay. And then we've heard you say that you do depression or you do anxiety. So when you say that depression and anxiety is something that you do, what do you mean? Can you give us some examples?
Yeah, it's something, and I'm not alone in this model, in this perspective, but it is very different than perhaps what you'll hear out of the medical community, perhaps, right? Depends who you're talking to, of course. My model, and that's all it is just a model, is that depression and anxiety are not necessarily something that we have.
Okay.
I say it is rather something that we do.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is depression is not necessarily something you have, like you have your left hand, for example, right? Like this is attached to me, right? And hopefully this is going to remain attached to me, you know, until, you know, for my whole life, right?
Yeah.
Depression is something that our brain does. No one chooses, of course, to be clear. No one chooses. No one wakes up in the morning and be like, hey, let me do depression. I want to do depression, right? But rather, it is something that just at an unconscious level, it is a recipe that the brain follows. And that's very empowering to especially my clients when I work with them one-on-one, because they understand that this is something that the brain is doing, and having joy and happiness is also something that they can then do. They just need to learn the recipe. They actually have it inside them. They just might not have used it for a while. That's what I mean.
All right. Thank you so much for that. And we're going to ask you a question that comes from our youth.
Okay.
So they ask, how can you deal with depression and anxiety at home? So it might be someone in your family, it might be a friend, it might be a spouse. So how can you deal with depression and anxiety at home?
Well, I mean, I'm a huge advocate of education and self-learning. I mean, depending on how old they are, I don't know the program, but the mental health first aid training that I just took last weekend was amazing, right? And it gives people that ability to have confidence in having these sort of conversations, right? The other thing is not to put it away, to address it. This is a real thing, right? And to actually talk about it and get help, right? And seek the help of professionals. And there's many services. For example, Nasiha, right? I mean, it's a total free line, non-judgmental, fully confidential, right? And they're there and they're taking calls every single day from youth.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we can move on to our next question. Dwelling on the past or the future is, not good, I guess we would say. And you can speak more to that later about those sort of thoughts. But what about thoughts like, I can't get anything right, or, I suck at school? What if I actually believe that I can't get anything right, or that I do suck at school, if I'm just trying to be positive, then am I not ignoring reality?
Yeah. So, when people work with me, normally they come to change behaviors, but what I'm really doing is I'm helping them change beliefs, right? And that's what's going on here. When you make these sort of statements like, I am not good, I am, bad at math, I am a failure, or I am all of this sort of talk about the self, these are statements at the identity level. And, the identity level, who you say I am, it is programming that you're sending to your unconscious, right? And you will make that true. Now, you said a very good point that you can't just, if you truly are bad at something, for example, let's pretend I don't know how to swim. Right now, I can spend my whole life saying I'm afraid of water. That's an identity statement. I am afraid of water, right? And I'll never try. But I can say it's change that to I am learning how to swim, right? But just by doing that, I can't just jump into the deep end.
Yeah.
I'm gonna drown, right?
Yeah.
So instead, it is I change that and then I acquire the skill. So
Okay.
I practice that, right?
So sorry, I'm going to have
Yeah,
to cut
no
you off
worries.
there because we have to take a short break, but we have more to share after the break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. You are watching the My Voice show on EOS. Before the break, we were speaking about mental health with Brother Muhammad Sheikh. He coaches people towards wellness and he helps them live awesome lives. So he says that depression and anxiety are normal states. They're only a problem if you're in those states all the time. As a coach, working with youth, you see a lot. What do you see? What are our youth experiencing today? What are the challenges they're experiencing?
It's really interesting because when I first started doing this sort of work, I would get kids come in, right? And most of the time, actually, it was the parents that needed the coaching, right? But now what's happening is the kids are coming in, and it actually is the kids. I'm seeing a lot more kids with anxieties, a lot of more kids with depression, and all of these sort of issues that are happening. And these are real challenges, and I'm trying to figure it out. One of the things, so I very much believe in a model that came out of the UK called the human Givens theory. Human Givens theory.
Givens theory.
Yeah.
Okay.
And basically, there are a bunch of psychologists and that put this model together, and they talk about the 9 human needs. And of these human needs that we have this need for emotional connection. Having this sort of an intimate relationship with another human being, and they define it as having a relationship where you absolutely are just you and the other person accepts you just the way you are, not trying to change anything. That's very important for us. Another thing is to feel that we are actually making a difference, having that sense of purpose, right? Another thing is to belong to social groups, right, in which we feel valued, that we're part of it, right? So all of these sort of, and there's more, but when you look at the kids that at least find themselves to my office, in my office, they're missing this, right? And the theory postulates that when you're missing these human needs, these are given needs, when you don't have them in your life, that's when problems start occurring. So we have kids that aren't actually building real relationships. They're not having real friends. We live in an era, of course, with technology, like social media, which is a horrible thing because, social media is really the best of the best, right? That's what people put up on social media, right? But the thing is, when you look at kids who aren't fully developed, right? The brain doesn't fully develop until the age of 30, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, but when you have, young kids, right? And they're on social media, they think that this is normal, this is how it's supposed to be all the time. And because they don't have those real relationships, perhaps, the ones that do, awesome, right? But when you don't, when you're looking at that as the model, problems start happening, right? It also doesn't help that most of us are parents, like, really my generation's fault, right? We ourselves are kind of addicted to the technologies, right? Or we're also living in a world where almost everything is being sold, right? So from the youngest of age, we're almost programmed that we need to buy this, we need to buy Apple, we need to buy Android, we need to have this car, this purse, this brand, all of that, because that is how we will get happiness, right? And so we're growing up with this, thinking that's how we attain happiness, as opposed to actually perhaps, and I always say perhaps, as opposed to perhaps learning how to create. Going back to my model of depression is not something that we have, it's something that we do. The same thing applies to joy, to gratitude, to love. It is not something that we innately just have in us. It is something that we're doing, right? So we don't necessarily learn how to cope when things are tough, how to activate gratitude or joy, or those seeking out and having those relationships, calling on our friends, or our parents, right? And having that emotional support when things are tough. So that's not the full answer, right? Like I said, this is something that, I'm devoting my life to, trying to figure out.
Yeah.
But these are some of the challenges that I see when I work with youth, and these are some of what might be causing those challenges, because it's very different than what I grew up with.
Yeah. So what if I have depression or other hindering thought patterns?
Sure.
How do I help myself? Or is that not an option because life is tough and, deal with it?
Yeah. Life is definitely tough, right? It's meant to be tough, right? It can also be absolutely amazing and wonderful, right? And both of these statements that I just said, like the one that you just said, are actually belief statements, right? That when you have someone that says, depression is the only way to go because, life is tough, that is a belief statement. And one of the questions I love empowering people with is, how does that belief serve you? How does that belief help you? Because and I kind of mentioned this to you offline, that people come to me hoping that I can help them change behaviors.
Okay.
But what I'm actually doing is I'm helping them change beliefs, because the behaviors are driven by the beliefs. So if you have someone that has a more resourceful belief, a belief that actually empowers you, right, that is going to drive different behaviors. Right? If I believe that I have this thing called depression and it's a life sentence and this is just the way it is, right? I'm not really going to work towards finding, because what's the point, right? Whereas also understanding that, putting it this way, that why questions are another thing that sometimes aren't useful. Because if I was to ask myself, well, why am I depressed, right? Or why does this always happen to me? Or why is everyone smarter than me? I had a client give me a call, and he was saying that, all through life growing up, he had to work harder than everyone else, right? In order to get his B. He had to study twice as hard, work 3 times as hard, and the best he could do was a B, right? And so I'm, like, why is that the case? And I said to him that, listen, we're all dealt different hands. We are, right? But if we were to focus all of our time and energy and resources on trying to ask ourselves why that is the case, we're not really going to get any further than we already are. It's going to keep us actually stuck, right? Rather asking more empowering questions, looking like, what do I do with the hand that I have? And what do I make? What do I actually want? Which brings me to the other thing, which is asking yourself questions and knowing what you want, not what you don't want. So many times I have people in the room and I'm like, so what do you want? They're like, well, I don't want to feel sad all the time. I don't want depression, and I borrow this from one of my coaches and mentors, but it's like, do you go to the grocery store with a list of all the things that you don't want to buy?
Oh, that's a really good analogy.
Yeah, you don't, right? You go with the grocery list of what you want, and if you're like me, you always come out with that list and some extras like cookies and ice cream, right? But
that makes life easier.
It makes life easier. So you have to know what you want, what you're working towards, and then practicing that, right? So to answer your question, so if we're having these sort of thoughts that are not empowering, that hold us back, if you're having feelings of depression, right? Understand, first of all, there's nothing wrong with you. A lot of the times I'm working with people that they think there's something wrong with them. It is not. Nothing's wrong with you. It is just the way your brain has decided to respond.
Oh, okay. It's a
Right.
response.
That's all it is, right? Our brain is always trying to make sense of things, and perhaps we don't know any better. That's we always will choose the best behavior given our choices, right? So when we choose what we want, right, and we ask help, and we tell people and we share and we build those social structures, and really we work towards wellness, which is why, again, I was saying right in the beginning that I rather talk about wellness, because I can go on my feed. I have a lot of people that follow me now, but I can go on my feed and basically say these are the symptoms of anxiety, right? And I don't like that, because those symptoms can include fear. Those symptoms can include loss of appetite. Those symptoms can include shortness of breath, right? Well, I can have those symptoms in any other case as well. So someone risks, perhaps having those symptoms and then be like, oh my God, I have an anxiety problem. Rather, as opposed to being like, what do you actually want? Right? When we talk about wellness, if I can write a post that says, this is what wellness looks like, now we have a roadmap. We have a destination in our GPS where let's work towards that. Because simply put, you can't be hot and cold at the same time.
Yeah.
If you're working towards wellness, you're going to, but all that says, easier said than done. Talk to people, get professional help, right? And then work. Take that your own active responsibility and ownership for your own wellness, right? That's how you work around and get through whatever it is that we're going through.
So you're big on wellness.
Yes.
And you have experience of helping other people get there. Can you show us something?
Yes. For sure. And that's a lot of my work. It's not talking. I
Yeah.
actually do very little talking.
Yeah.
It's more experiential. I want to show people.
Okay.
Right? Okay, cool. So go ahead and just put your hands on your knees.
Okay. Good. Put this down.
Okay, cool. Close your eyes. And this is something I learned from HeartMath Institute. They've been doing research for the last 30 years, all on the energetics of the heart and talking about building resiliency. So focus your attention on the area of your heart. And breathe in and out of your heart area, deeper and slower than usual. And if it's comfortable for you, breathe 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out. But whatever is comfortable. And now activate an emotion that is renewing, such as love or care for someone or something in your life. Holding that emotion. In your heart. Okay, that's good. Thank you. Now, to give you some of the science behind that, if I had you hooked up to a heart rate variability sensor, what you would see is that your heart rhythm actually changes to a rhythm that's more coherent. Your sympathetic and your parasympathetic branches of your autonomic nervous system, they actually become in sync. And your mind, body, and heart start working together, the optimal way to function, right? And your body actually also, by doing that exercise, when we activate an emotion that is renewing, our body actually begins to produce the hormone DHEA, which is a vitality hormone, which also helps with calming the brain, calming the anxieties, cortical facilitation, basically making us think better, be more creative, doing everything, right? So that's what I'm talking about, helping people be awesome. But an exercise like that, honestly, if you guys were to do this exercise 5 minutes every day for 1 month, you will notice a huge difference in your life.
All right. Thank you so much, Brother Muhammad, for joining us. How can people reach you?
Yes.
What's the best way?
So the best way is you can go to my website, coachthemind.ca. But I encourage people to, follow me on Facebook, right? I don't put pictures of my meals all the time, right? I like to engage people. I like to put posts that are actually useful that they can apply themselves, and also Instagram as well, right? So I'm sure the links will be in this feed or something. But just go to coachthemind.ca and you'll be able to follow me from there.
Thank you so much for joining us. Please visit our website. You can subscribe to our magazine, to our newsletter. You can leave us a question. And do not forget to write to us if you want to join our team or start a chapter in your city. Take care. See you next time. This is the My Voice team from the EOS studio.